Hey, I am here today because it is July, and so we have passed 6 months of reading, and I wanted to show you my 6 favorite books, or talk about my 6 favorite books so far this year. So the first one is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. If you have followed my page for a while, I've been reading that series, The Way of the Kings, and I love Brandon Sanderson's work. I love that it is epic fantasy. It doesn't have massive romantasy. I just love the thrill of the fight, the battle, the learning about the different parts of the worlds. I love everything that he writes so far that I've read, and Words of Radiance was actually better than The Way of the Kings. I loved it so much. I was surprised. If you don't know, those books are chunky books. He writes some big, thick books, especially that series. And I think I read that in a matter of just a couple weeks. I love the book so much, and I am so excited this month that I am going to start the 3rd book in that series, Oathbringer, in the next week or 2 once I finish the book that I'm currently on. The second book that I read this year that I loved was Dark Rise. This series is getting like no love on TikTok, which is crazy to me. It is YA, I believe. However, this book, let me tell you though, is got the biggest vocabulary that I've seen in a book in a really long time. But anyways, it is a fantasy book about this dark king who is coming back, and these young people they're all from different parts of this storyline that are trying to come together in order to save the world. And Dark Rise is just written so beautifully. I read this aloud with my son, and he's been obsessed with it ever since. We purchased Dark Air, and we are currently working on reading through that. This is a really fun fantasy series if you're looking for something that is pretty epic, quite honestly. There's so much to this storyline, but is also appropriate for a little bit younger crowd. Again, no romantasy in it. If that's not your vibe, this is a fun, there is a little bit of a teeny tiny romance plot, but it's not like anything to do with the actual story. So you're gonna like this. I hope more people talk about it. I hope more people listen to it. Or read it. It is a really, really good series so far. My 3rd book of the month, or the year, is The Firekeepers Daughter. I have seen this on here. It was trending a little bit when it first came out, I think. But this book right here is really good. If you're into, it's not historical because it is set in modern times, I believe. But it is a very good dive into the lives and the culture and what is still happening now on reservations in the United States with the Native Americans who are living on these reservations, and how their lives have been affected by the drug culture, by their culture as whom they are, and things like that. And it was a really, really well made book. I feel like they really touched on those topics gracefully, but also really brought a lot of that to the forefront so that you do understand that there are issues in their communities, and that they are trying really hard within themselves to help fix the things that are going on in their communities. So I loved this story and learning. So if you know anything about me, I love reading to learn, and this was fun because it was a fiction, but also I learned a lot from this book. Book 4 is Remarkably Bright Creatures. This book isn't going to be everybody's cup of tea because it is a little slow. It is kind of just a calm, like cozy read. I loved it though so much. I am in love with the octopus who narrates very tiny parts of this story, but just the whole storyline is so beautifully put together, especially by the end, that you just fall in love with these characters. And yes, it's slow. It's not something that's epic. It's not an adventure. It is just the coming together of this world and these people and the octopus and the whole storyline of that. And it's brilliantly done, and it will make you think and it will make you feel, and I love that so much for this book. So this definitely was one of my top 6 for the year. The 5th book is The House on Cerulean Sea. Again, this one's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It does have a queer element, so if that's something you're just adamantly against, I mean, that sucks, but then it's not going to be for you. But this book was so fun. If you've ever watched the show Umbrella Academy, this is like, in my mind, that's what I kept coming back to, was Umbrella Academy, and it was very funny and fun. The characters that have the powers in this book, which is what makes it kind of like a fantasy fiction, are young. They're young kids. They're learning about themselves. They're learning about how to control their different elements and the things that make them them. And it's really fun found family. It is a really fun acceptance kind of book, like coming into yourself and accepting who you are book. I loved it so much, and I just really enjoyed the whole community and the family that they are all part of in this story, and cried a little bit here and there, and I just really enjoyed that book. It definitely made my top 6 so far this year, and I hope that you pick it up if you haven't. The last book so far this year that made my top 6 is The Women by Kristen Hanna, and I don't really need to say much about that. I feel like I've talked about it on here. If you want to review specifically about it, then cool, but it is obviously about the Vietnam veterans, specifically the females who served during Vietnam, whether that's as a nurse or on a boat or whatever they did, and how Vietnam affected them personally. But it does really go into all Vietnam veterans and how the experience differed so greatly from one veteran to another, but how in returning from the war, they were treated so poorly. And anything written by her is going to make my top books, just because she does so much work in like the research process and making sure there's so much facts and so much details, but still manages to keep a historical fiction just ball rolling, and it is so much fun to read, even though this one broke my heart within the first 3 chapters. So like, brace for that. There are sad things. We do talk about PTSD, we do talk about death and a little bit of goriness. It is a war. But if you like historical fiction and you don't know Kristen Hanna, then I don't know where you are, but read her books, all of them. I could recommend every single one of them. At least all the ones I've read so far are freaking 6-star books. So thanks for hanging out with me. This has been fun. I will have another one again at the end of the year to finish off the last 6 books, and I'll keep reading for you guys.